the major sources of income generated by the use of a song is a mechanical royalty due from the sale of CDs, downloads, records, and tapes. Over the years, the minimum statutory mechanical rate has been increased from 2.1 cents to 9.6 cents, which was set in 2006. But recently, there was a CRB decision that was handed down. And
yeah, on this real quick, I just want to tell you, we've been floundering out in the music world for a couple of years, not knowing what's happening with our mechanical royalty rates and our ringtone rates. 2006, the Copyright Royalty Board, the biggest, they handed down this preliminary opinion, which basically said that master tones were going to be subject to the compulsory licensing section 115 of the U.S. Copyright Act, which sent chills through our spines in the music industry, those of us that represent creators, because we always talked about master tones being like a derivative work of a full song, since you're just downloading a portion of the song. And previously, we've been negotiating rates for those, so it was based on market value. So when I was doing stuff for like Tupac, I was getting like 35 cents a track for the song on the master tone, the publishing side, because we didn't really have rates. So when this came down in 2006, we all kind of freaked out. And then, so for 2 years, we didn't really know what the Copyright Royalty Board was going to agree on. So, and a lot of our agreements with our publishers were blanket licenses that were running out because we had negotiated some market rates for the master tones. So when we just got this ruling on October 2nd, it was really, we were very, very excited, because now we are getting 24 cents, which is a set rate for master tone publishing royalties, and that's in effect for 5 years. And now they just stayed the current mechanical royalty rate for 0.091 cents for the next 5 years. Which, if my material is getting sampled, that's not really great. But if I'm sampling someone's material, it's good. So, and everybody is happy with that, the publishers.
Yeah, but I think people are satisfied because there's some kind of finality in the industry, so everyone knows what the rates will be for the next 5 years, which in some respects at least is good for my CFO, who can now plot out the income course, as opposed to me telling him, well, the rate changes every 2 years. But yeah, as Dina said, it's interesting. By having a 5-year rate, we're no longer going to get into the situation which was valuable, especially in the sample area. If a recording artist samples a song, and the sampled composition normally comes in at statutory, which is 9.1 cents. Under the old rules, where the rate used to go up every 2 years, the sample would get more and more money every 2 years. But now, it was called a floating statutory rate. It floats with the new rate, but now it's going to be 9.1 cents. So it does hurt a little bit in that situation, but at least there is some finality to the next 5 years, so which in some respects is good.
Well, also, like, for instance, like, the good news for me, like representing someone like maybe Tupac, is that now our mechanical royalty rates for the samples have been escalating because of the rate changes, and now they're stayed. Like, I know in 1998 when we sampled Bruce Hornsby The Way It Is, the rate was 0.071 cents for under 5 minutes of playing time, and it's escalated to 0.091 cents, even though my controlled composition clause for the distribution of that album was fixed in 1998. So my aggregate rate for the album, for me as the songwriter, was fixed, but the sample rates kept going up and up and up. So you talk to, say 10 years later, that song came out, and there's a bunch of other samples on that album. And, the samples pretty much are eating 40% of the mechanical royalty rates on that album because of the floating mechanical royalty.
Yeah. Just very quickly, since we're talking about money on this panel, I mean, what does this really mean? 9.1 cents. I'll give you a quick example. 9.1 cents is not only for physical product, vinyl, CDs, you name it, but it's also for digital distribution right now. Permanent full downloads. Give you a quick example. Give you some what digital sales really mean these days. And, in the digital world, you're really looking at the money comes from the A-side singles, as opposed to what used to be album cuts and B-sides, et cetera, in the old days. We'll get into albums a little bit later, but I'll give you the digital sales for the top 2 songs last week and give you a feel for what's going on. Britney Spears' Womanizer, probably spearheaded by her video, I must say. They sold 285,782 copies, in the current week. All you do is, if you're the music publisher or songwriter, pretty much you times 9.1 cents times that 285,000. Live Your Life by T.I., 225,000 units. Those are the top two for the week. Now, hopefully, I mean, there are a lot of songs that actually get to 1 million. I'll give you two examples. Whatever You Like by T.I. is about 1.4 million, and So What by Pink is about 1.431 million. So once again, you're times the 9.1 cents times that amount of sales, and that's your digital royalties.
Nice.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sorry, Todd, real quick. It's funny because this is changing the whole landscape of how record companies are doing subsequent releases under their recording contract. And one of my clients, Baby Bash, one of the singles off his last album, Cyclone, between digital and mobile tone, have sold over 4 million copies. So now we're moving into the second album cycle on our deal with RCA, and they come calling back to me and they said, well, maybe we shouldn't put out a whole album. Maybe we should just put out a couple of songs. And I said, yeah, great, but I got a guaranteed release clause, pay up. So, it's actually changed the way that we're starting to think about making records, because, we put out this record, costs, $500,000-$600,000 to make, and you have, one track that does 4.1 million copies combined, digital and mobile, and you're wondering, why we're going to go and put out the album, so the next album.
Yeah, a quick thing also, just because we're talking about the U.S. here, that 9.1 cents continuing for the next 5 years, but so much, the American product does so well outside the U.S. You've got to be aware of what's going on in other countries as far as the mechanical rates going. It's interesting. I'll give you a couple rates out there. They're percentage rates. They're not penny rates like we have in the U.K. This is for physical product. There's a distinction now between physical as well as online product downloads. 8.5% of the purchase price of the dealer is the price in England for all the mechanicals on an album or a single. The EU is 9.009% of the PPD purchase price of the dealer. That's the physical product side. What's happened, you've had a copyright tribunal, a decision in the UK last year, which set the rates for downloads and various other things. I'll just give you an example here. So you've got on one side the physical rates I just gave you. The copyright tribunal was British Phono Industry, Yahoo, AOL, MCPS, and PRS. Those were the parties of this decision. And remember what happens outside the U.S. In many countries, the Performance Rights Society, PRS in England, and the Mechanical Society, MCPS in England, give you an example, have some kind of a joint venture, or they're combined, or there's some kind of relationship as opposed to what happens in the U.S., where Performing Rights Societies and the Mechanical Society are very separate entities. So what they do, I'll use England as an example, they use a joint online license. So it's a combined license that they give, which covers both the mechanical and the performance aspect of a particular, let's say, download or stream. So this decision came out, and I'll give you the rates on it, just so you know. For permanent and limited downloads, 8% of the gross revenue from online music service providers and on-demand services. Interactive website services, 6.5%, 5.75% for webcasting. So these, I'm giving these rates quickly. They're in our book in case anybody wants them, but at least they're settled over there, where there's no discussion about whether there's a performance or a mechanical in a download or a stream. They've already settled that issue with these joint online licenses. They've come up with the rates now, so these things are set for a while. In Canada, they had a copyright royalty board decision, which was very good. It determined the rates for downloads, for on-demand streaming, and for webcasting. They came out with a combined total of 12.2% of the revenue. And then they split out between communication right and the reproduction right, which is the performance and mechanical rights, within that 12.2%. So it's a very good rate in Canada. I mention all this because, U.S. artists do very well outside, and you should be going through every major country in the world. I look at France, Germany, England, Canada, Australia as major, and Japan, major repertory areas for the U.S. So you've got to know what the mechanicals are out there, and they've got different ones now for the online world as well versus physical product, and they're all percentage rates as opposed to what we do here.
Jeff, you want to talk about the interactive streaming rates?
Yeah, let me spend just, and this is going to be a really brief few comments on the new rules that the Copyright Royalty Board enacted. And we're still in the comment period right now, so these rates are still not effective.
Which means we really don't understand what they did.
That's why everyone's commenting. Wait, what does this mean? That's the comment. Pretty much, this is for interactive streaming and limited downloads. Limited download meaning a timeout download or a download that really stays with you as long as you keep on subscribing to a particular service, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a retroactive situation and there's a going forward situation. And this is for the song only. We're not talking about master recordings or anything else. There's a retroactivity of 8.5% of the revenue to the service, and it's less. The monies that have been paid to are being paid to performance rights societies, to ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. They're very complicated definitions, and that's why I didn't want to get into it right now, because really what this means as far as money to songwriters and music publishers is really up in the air right now until there's going to be a lot of audits also. Everyone's going to have their own interpretation of what revenue is and all the various deductions from revenue and how much they pay to the performance rights societies and whether there's a bundle subscription service or a full music subscription service, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not really going to get into the ins and outs of this whole thing, but on a going forward basis, it's 10.5% of the revenue to the service, less what they pay to ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. There are floors. I'll give you one quick example for standalone, non-portable subscription streaming services.
Which is what? What is an example of that?
But basically that's something that you can't take around with you in your handheld device. It's on your computer at home. But there's a floor of 15 cents per subscriber per month. That's how they determine what the royalty pool is. That's the minimum. And I guarantee you that every service out there is going to try to get to the minimum somehow or another. But these rates have just been established. As I said, we're still in the comment period. There are a few more days before these actually become finalized, or there could be comments, there could be appeals, et cetera. So this is really too new to really get into. It does establish a certain right that was not there before, and that's the one good thing for writers and music publishers. How much it means in terms of income, we'll see in the future. So
I think it's one thing, I just want to clarify one thing. This is interactive streaming. Yeah. Okay, as opposed to non-interactive streaming, which would be Sirius and XM radio and webcasting and things of that nature. So with respect to interactive streaming, what we're saying is that there's two rights. There's a mechanical right and there's a public performance right, as opposed to non-interactive streaming, where there's a public performing right, and even though the publishers said, okay, we won't get paid for the mechanical right, they haven't, right, Todd? They said it still exists, we just won't get paid for it, right, for the non-interactive.